Well, hey there, folks. I'm Meteorologist Matt Barrentine. We are watching the tropics once again, even into the middle of November here. Actually, I guess by the time this thing actually gets itself going, it may still be the middle of November. I guess if today's the 12th, we're talking towards the end of the week and going into the weekend. But basically, this, whatever happens, could be carrying on into late November. So this is going to be, once again, just another one of those weird things that we just keep seeing here in the tropics this year. So November is not typically a very busy month as far as the Gulf of Mexico is concerned, or really the tropics are concerned. And since 1970, only a few storms. We're going back more than 50 years. Let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 storms that have impacted the Gulf Coast in 54 years. You do the math about every 6 years or so, right? That we're seeing a storm make a landfall. And these are generally, except for one, Kate, in 1985, these are all tropical storms. So they're generally pretty weak. The ones that do make landfall at this time of year. So what are we looking at now? What are we watching out for? Now, notice Raphael was not on the list because Raphael never made landfall. It fell apart over the middle of the Gulf, never made landfall. And the rain that we're getting today is actually the remnants of Raphael. That low, that foreign Raphael is still actually in the northern Gulf right now. It still hasn't made landfall. So that's why Raphael was not on that list. Where you might see a new storm on the list is here. We're looking at, once again, the same old spot down there in the southern or western part of the Caribbean. Same area that we saw Raphael develop and a couple other storms we've been keeping an eye on the last couple of weeks. So it's been active down there, and it looks like another storm is going to take shape. Here's the GFS model. Put this into motion here, and it's going to show a system developing in the western Gulf and just kind of sitting there for several days. This is going into the weekend. That's noon on Sunday, so right now it's Tuesday, so we're still talking multiple days out here. And then eventually it starts moving, at least by this model, shows it lifting north into the Gulf of Mexico on Tuesday at noon. That's the GFS or the American model. Let's take you back to, how about the European model? It's going to show almost the exact same thing. A very, very similar setup to where it's just kind of sitting there in the Western Caribbean for a couple of days, and maybe even kind of bobbling around is what it shows here on this one. And then as we head into next week, it shows it making landfall there in the Cozumel area and eventually getting into the Gulf there as well. So the two main models are very similar, and they both show this system eventually getting into the Gulf. Now, once it gets in the Gulf, it's going to have to deal with wind shear, particularly in the northern half of the Gulf. So I don't have any concerns really of this reaching all the way to the northern Gulf Coast. Where the folks that are going to have to watch out for an actual tropical system making landfall, it's going to be more likely into southwest Florida. And if we go back to this map, the November named storms that have happened since 1970 and made landfall on the Gulf Coast, as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them made landfall in southwest Florida. So when they do happen, that's typically where they end up because they get pulled to the north, and eventually a cold front comes down, grabs it, pushes it off to the north and east into the southwest Florida area. So that's typically what happens with these storms, and that's probably what's going to happen here. Is that eventually it's going to get picked up by a cold front and then dragged into South Florida, most likely just as a tropical storm at that point. If it's even a tropical storm, it may just end up being moisture added into a front. So that's what we're watching out for. It's going to be an interesting one to have this late in the season. If it does do, especially with that GFS, the American model has it basically completely stationary for about 4 or 5 days down there. Of course, if it's stationary that long, that means there's no steering currents, and that's really why the things get squirrely with this. It could end up in a lot of places, but the main models are showing a very similar setup to where it kind of sits out there in the Caribbean for a while, then eventually starts to lift off to the north. Now, whether that lifts north into the Gulf or it completely falls apart is too early to know yet, but just stay tuned. We're going to obviously be tracking this here at Fox 10. We'll let you know what's happening with this storm. Like I said, I have no real concerns for it ever getting to us because there's too much wind shear in the northern Gulf. fronts coming down that creates a lot of wind, about 30,000 feet above our heads is just a big river of air called the polar jet stream. And that's going to rip any tropical system apart. So no worries for us, but it'll be interesting to see if it can work its way into the Gulf and then maybe eventually make a landfall over there in southwest Florida. That's a possibility we'll be watching out for. Once again, you can check us out on Fox News 3, 4, and 5 tonight. We're going to have all the latest on this and, of course, just your regular forecast. Thank you so much for joining us here. Hope you have yourself a great day, and we'll catch up with you soon.